Israel's strike, excuse me, has done is it has backed Iran into a corner. There was a negotiation taking place, which was set up to reduce the likelihood of Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons in that region. And what has happened now is it has created a sense of insecurity and a lack of faith in diplomatic solutions for the Iranians. It's not helpful for Israel in the long term or for any state in the region. This has pushed Iran into a corner. Whether they go ahead and move further with a nuclear weapons program is still to be seen, but the only solution in the region is a diplomatic negotiation. What we have seen is that nuclear weapons do not provide security for countries. Countries that have nuclear weapons are more likely to engage in conflict and to actually lose civilians and lose soldiers because of those conflicts. It is not a security blanket. Nuclear deterrence is a myth. It's a theory that if it fails, whether you believe it or not, if it fails, it is catastrophic for everyone. So what we're seeing is that this idea that nuclear weapons could be helpful for long-term security is not beneficial. What Israel's strike has done, it has shown that Israel thinks it can, because of its own nuclear weapons, be a bully in the region. And that is not helpful. And it's not something that will make Israelis safer, nor Iranians as we go further down the line. More than 100 countries have fully rejected the idea of nuclear weapons. And that is something that all countries have said that they aspire to. Nuclear weapons are not security guarantees. They are potential catastrophes. Attacking nuclear facilities is something that has happened in the past, in fact, in Iran, and it has led to an increased scrutiny and a general commitment and agreement. There's a norm building that this is unacceptable, because if you attack a nuclear facility, you risk releasing radioactive nuclides into the surrounding atmosphere. You risk contaminating the area, which a contamination which can last for generations. And that is unsafe it's unsafe for any moment, but to cause intergenerational harm is never a good thing. And that's why the international community has stayed away from attacking nuclear facilities. What we have seen so far in this ongoing conflict is that the attack on Natanz in Iran, in uranium enrichment facility, has reported to not have released radioactive material. But if the crisis continues and escalates further, and there are further attacks, for example, on the Bushehr nuclear reactor, that could be a terrible problem both for Iranians and for others in the region. It's a dangerous game, and it's a dangerous escalation. Attacking nuclear facilities is unacceptable at any time, and most of the world agrees that, as they have repeated annually at the UN General Assembly. No, this cannot normalize military responses to nuclear ambitions. The thing is, you cannot develop nuclear weapons in secret. We have so much available open source technology, it is impossible to continue a clandestine nuclear program. Just impossible. Even the suspicion of that is brought to the International Atomic Energy Agency. There's an international mechanism to verify that nuclear material is not made into nuclear weapons. That is the way things need to go. This action is the action of a rogue state that has now created a huge problem for itself as well as for every one of its neighbors. This is not beneficial for anyone in the region. What we need to see is international cooperation, like those states who work with the International Atomic Energy Agency, or, as I said, the nearly 100 states who are on board the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, to make sure this type of thing never happens again. You can't hide a nuclear weapons program, and no one should even try. Realistically, nuclear weapons are going to be used. If they both have nuclear weapons, if there is an arms race in the region, it's already a highly volatile region. And we will see an escalation of crisis after crisis until nuclear weapons are used. And that will cause catastrophe. And again, that's the kind of catastrophe that doesn't only impact the targeted area, but a nuclear weapon is such a devastating weapon of mass destruction that will have long-term consequences for both the area of attack as well as the surrounding region. You cannot stop the consequences of a nuclear weapon beyond borders. And it is a significant problem. And that's why regional actors need to come together to encourage restraint. It is difficult. And only the strong vote for negotiations, and only the strong go through the process of demonstrating restraint and a commitment to change. And that is what we need to see here. We need to see a demonstration of strength through diplomacy, not through weapons. In order for the Cold War style deterrence for it to be effective, you need to have a clear understanding of what your opponent is thinking and how they will react. And what we have seen time and time again is in this region, nobody understands what their adversaries are thinking. Nobody can assume and predict what their adversary will do in response to certain actions. And so a Cold War style deterrence is not going to work here. The region is too volatile and the risk of accident and miscalculation is too high. Plus, it's a densely populated region. We're going to see tremendous consequences. And again, not only to those who live there, but this will have massive impact on the global economy. We've already seen a huge spike in oil prices this morning. We're going to see that continue and going to see it get worse just from the conflict that we're seeing now. If there is some sort of nuclear arms race in the region, that is going to spiral out of control and it's going to be devastating for the world. There are 9 countries in the world that have nuclear weapons. In fact, last year they spent $100 billion on their nuclear arsenals. The introduction of another nuclear armed country is a destabilizing factor. And it will impact both the existing alliances. It will also force countries who are not currently in engagement or in alliances with other nuclear armed states to try and make some security arrangements there. It does not help build a long-term interconnected society. What it does is it further destabilizes an already unstable region. And that's a severe problem. And it's something that we should be watching out for. And we need to prevent the development of a nuclear arms program from Iran. But we also need to talk about Israel's nuclear weapons. They have about 90 nuclear weapons, and talk about what we're doing to dismantle and disarm those. Because as long as those stay in the region, that incentive to build up for others to build up their own nuclear arsenal will continue. The only way to prevent the buildup of nuclear weapons in the region is to reduce and eliminate what's there now, because more weapons means more problems. What we're starting to see is other countries in the region, in particular Saudi Arabia, looking to enhance and increase its nuclear energy programs, its nuclear capabilities. And that is seen by some analysts as a step towards building a latent nuclear weapons capacity. However, international inspections and international agreements to which Saudi Arabia participates in, prevent that kind of thing from happening. And as long as those international arrangements through the International Atomic Energy Agency continue, we can prevent the movement of nuclear materials into military programs. And that is something that, again, is quite important. And that's something we think we will continue to see. There are other countries in the region that have nuclear programs, and they are not developing nuclear weapons. And they participate in inspections. They participate in international governance discussions around the International Atomic Energy Agency. They host monitoring systems for the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization to make sure that nuclear weapons development does not occur. So I think there's a strong sense within the region that more nuclear weapons are problematic. And there have been efforts since the 1970s to bring that entire region into a broad weapons of mass destruction free zone. And that is an opportunity. There are ongoing conferences at the UN to discuss this and to build this around. And that means taking out all weapons of mass destruction, no biological weapons, no chemical weapons, no nuclear weapons, so that everyone can come to the table without the threat of mass destruction. Again, it's very difficult to build nuclear weapons. And once built, the countries that have them do keep them under strict controls in order to prevent them from being stolen, or for the facilities from being broken into, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, there are accidents. We have seen that countries lose nuclear weapons. They've fallen out of aircraft. In fact, four off the coast of fell out of an airplane off the coast of Spain in the 1960s. And we have seen citizens break into nuclear armed facilities where nuclear weapons are kept. Luckily, not in a terrorist act, but more as an effort to draw attention to what was happening in those areas, which were previously rather clandestine. There are safeguards in that the existence of there's both governmental monitoring through national security means in order to assess where and how nuclear weapons are being developed and where they are moving, and what capacities exist across countries. And there's also the International Atomic Energy Agency, which goes in and looks at facilities and ensures that the materials needed to make a nuclear weapon nuclear are kept and tracked in a way that they cannot be diverted to weapons programs. That requires what's called an additional protocol. It's a little bit further and stronger agreement with the agency than we see with as the sort of the baseline standard. But most countries now have those additional protocols. And there's constant open source technology monitoring the movement of materials, the development of materials, and what is being produced and where. For example, the International Panel on Fissile Materials is an independent organization based out of Princeton University, and they track who has what and what are they doing with it. And that's something that is independently verifying the lack of diversion into military programs. So it's difficult to make a nuclear weapon. It's difficult to take a nuclear weapon, but we still have to worry about accident and miscalculation by those who have nuclear weapons. And that is what worries me the most. And it's something that we can only deal with by eliminating the weapons that exist, which there's an international treaty in place to do so. And that's something that I think we need to talk about and bring all states on board to. The thing is, every country that has nuclear weapons is involved in some kind of conflict or another, either by proxy or directly. And we've seen this time and time again. They have, since when they get nuclear arms, they are emboldened to engage in exploratory conflict. And it's time and time again that they sort of look at possibilities or sort of think that they are immune to attack. What we're seeing in the risk in this region in particular is that there's so much tension. It's so hot already that the flashpoints, the idea of a cooler head preventing escalation, seems quite far off. And so we have to look to cooler heads to prevail, bringing in others to help soothe the situation between Iran and Israel right now, and to get to a negotiated solution that takes all weapons of mass destruction out of the region. And that will make things stable for a longer time. Instability and unrest lead to problems. But the international community, I know, is looking very closely at this and looking at ways that as soon as this flare-up simmers down a bit, to make sure that there are long-term negotiated solutions to eliminate the potential for weapons of mass destruction in the region.